Welcome to 2024 Our Story, a podcast exploring what it's like to be attending Scripps College in a moment when the world is recovering from a global pandemic. I'm Ellen.
And I'm Alyssa, and today we're joined by Scarlette McCullough, a sophomore at Scripps majoring in economics and a member of the CMS track and field team. Scarlette, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, we're so excited. We've been talking to you about doing this for forever, but today we get to bring you on, and I think we're even more interested in specifically the topic that this episode is going to be on, which if you're listening and you've probably looked at the title of the episode, you already know, but testing positive for COVID-19 while on campus. It's something that Alyssa and I haven't been able to personally go through, but something that is really important right now, specifically with the rise in COVID cases and all of the restrictions that have come into play over the past few weeks.
Well, just like before, to give some context about me testing positive is that I, like, again, as Alyssa mentioned, that I am on the CMS track team, and we'd had a meet on a Saturday, and a lot of my track team ended up testing positive. A lot of my track team is kind of relative. There was probably like 4 or 5 cases tested positive from that event. And we actually, there was a lot of worrying amongst the track team about getting our program getting shut down as well. So I definitely wasn't like the only person I knew at that time getting COVID, but all the rest of the teammates that got COVID were actually from CMC.
When was that track meet specifically?
Yeah, I could look at the date. It was at the beginning of February. It was an alumni meet. So we had alumni coming in and also competing with us. So it wasn't a real meet. It was more of like a practice meet, but there were like official times and marks. So it's like a big kind of like reunion meet for previous track team members.
So you were still on campus then? It wasn't like you went to a different college?
No, this was all at down behind Roberts. Yeah, like on our track at Claremont McKenna.
Oh, wow. And then, so did you find out first that you tested positive, or it was like you and your teammates kind of like find out at the same time, or did someone else test positive and then you realized maybe you should get tested? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, usually I would get tested on Tuesdays like sophomores do. But that Monday I happened to have like gotten up early and I was like, oh, I have some time, might as well just get tested, because I'm like already up, and sometimes it's like hard for me to remember not to eat like an hour before getting tested. So I just got tested on that Monday just for like whatever, did my regular Monday, went to bed, and I woke up and I checked my email like I usually do. And I checked my lab results and I opened it up and the screen read positive and my heart just kind of sunk. I was like, okay. I called my roommate, who happened to be like out having breakfast because she'd just been tested, that like, hey, I just tested positive. You should head back here. Like, I don't know, because I have a roommate, and I was like, I've spent a lot of time with you. We've been in here without masks. So she came back in and we put on masks, and I actually called like the Scripps health like COVID testing people first before they called me about my positive result, because I was so worried about having tested positive, and I was like, why haven't they called me yet? Because it was like 8:30, which isn't like that late, but it's still like, I don't know, I could have been doing 1,000 things, which is just interesting with getting your results back not at a consistent time. I think like a lot of people experience that, because like sometimes you'll get it back at night and then sometimes it's like the next day. So the chances of like you coming back positive and interacting with other people more is like frustrating. But they were like, okay, we're gonna like send you down to Oasis. They give you like 45 minutes to pack. And it's like a very like stressful packing process, because they're like, you could be there for like 5 days or you could be there for 10. And you're like, what could I possibly need for like 10 days? So you're like, I had not done any of my laundry at that point. So I was like, okay, this is what I have. So I just like threw a ton of like underwear, socks. And then I was like, what medication will I need? Like, what things could I possibly need? Because they're not supplying you with like any tissues, which was like a really like weird thing to me, because you're sending people into like a cold situation, and I ended up like buying myself tissues like through Instacart, but like I brought like cold medicine and like all my toothpaste and like lotion and like everything, and you're like packing for 2 weeks, but you also have to like bring your whole sheets, so you're basically like clearing out your dorm room. And I only have a carry-on suitcase, so I was like shoving things into like different bags, and I was like, must have looked crazy coming out to the minivan for them to drive me to Oasis. Yeah, I guess it's kind of the beginning of it a little bit, and some in the middle.
Oh, that's a lot. I mean, even just getting a positive COVID test and like reading that is overwhelming in so many ways. Like, how did you feel? Or like, what was the emotional like roller coaster of that moment?
I was really just worried about my roommate like having COVID. And I was also worried about like my other friends that I had seen that weekend and other members of my track team. But I'd been like having like meals with my friends. And so like I'd been in like close contact with them for like more than, I forget the exact number. Is it an hour or 20? I think it's 20 minutes. But funny thing is that none of my friends tested positive. And like none of my friends from the track team, like the girl group of my friends got COVID either. And those were the two people I'd probably spent the most time with over the weekend. So it's a kind of a joke amongst my like friends here at Scripps that they're just like built different, because like my one friend's been exposed like twice because she was on like a rec soccer team with someone who tested positive, and she's yet to test positive. So
Wow. Just listening to the beginning part of your story, I feel like what I've heard is that they will always just like call you when you test positive. And I don't know why I didn't think that like obviously it would also show up on the website first, but I thought it was like an immediate call. But it is interesting that you said like, yeah, we do get a different time of the day with our results. So wow. So from that call, was it 45 minutes right after that call, they were just like, hey, you're going to be there for 10 days. Did they tell you what they were going to provide you with? Or did you have to like just pack whatever you thought you needed? Kind of like, did they inform you of what there would and would not be in Oasis?
yeah, so I had actually had some awareness of what Oasis life was like, because in the fall, I got a cold, and the weekly survey that we fill out through Healthfully, if you check symptoms, you get like put like on a list, and they called me and they're like, hey, and this was at the time when COVID testing was still done through Scripps at the 240 house, and it was a nasal swab and not the spit test. And at that time, those tests were like really hard to like book appointments for. And it was just kind of like a weird situation and like disorganized. But I'd written down that I had gotten symptoms. And so Scripps at that time wasn't super organized with their management of COVID. So I actually got driven in an ambulance from Scripps campus to Oasis. And I was there for 2 nights by myself, and they drop off food for you that's made from a lot, like twice a day. You get like a brunch, lunch, and then dinner. But then I was there, and then I had to get taken back through an ambulance to get tested, and then back to Oasis in an ambulance. And then those tests take so long to get back to you that I was like in there for another day. And then I was taken back from Oasis after I was cleared for not having COVID in an ambulance. So I've taken like 4 ambulance rides because of like possible COVID. So I'd actually been in Oasis already and kind of knew the situation going into it when I did test positive for COVID in February.
Wow. I have like
we're
no
both
words.
just stunned at this point. We're like,
Yeah.
that is a lot. I'm
In an ambulance?
Yeah,
Like-
they couldn't like get consistent drivers or something. And I was like, I've never felt like, my roommate had an accident earlier that week. And so she'd happened to randomly have been in an ambulance, but she was like completely fine. It ended up being like completely fine. But I was like, did you have the same guys as me? And it turned out that she did. And I was like, they seem so young. Like, I don't know if I like would trust them if I was actually like in danger. I don't know. It was just kind of funny. So we'd both been in ambulances within a week, but no COVID cases.
love that. It was just a roommate bonding experience.
I mean, yeah, all the COVID scares have been that way, I would say.
Oh my gosh. How did your roommate take all of the information?
Yeah, when I tested positive for COVID, I think there was a lot of anxiety in like my friend group. Like I was kind of already like I tested positive and I got like super like anxious and like stressed out in like the packing, but then I'm just kind of like, it is what it is and there's not a ton I can do to like change it. So I was kind of like resigned. I think when you're like marked as a close contact, that's like a really stressful experience. And plus the tests take so long to get back that you don't have this like immediate, like, okay, I don't have it type situation. And you need to continue to get tested, which is just like, you wish you could just know. So I think that was like a very anxiety filled time. And at the same time, I think my roommate is with her family for Easter, and it's been weird having nobody to share a room with too. And I think that dynamic was also weird for her being in the room without me for like 10 days, ultimately.
Did you all like text each other while you were out, maintaining some form of communication?
Yeah, then we like definitely like FaceTimed. I FaceTimed with like a lot of my friends here at Scripps, and especially like my parents, because a lot of people who go into Oasis will go in with their roommate if someone else tests positive around the same time as them. But I'd had a roommate at Oasis when I first tested positive in February for like 4 hours. And then because she's from Southern California, she was able to like leave and go quarantine at home. So I was like alone in my room for 10 days. So I was like communicating with people on the outside a lot, because it's it's called isolation for a reason. It's very isolating. So communicating with my roommate and also my friends and family was a good thing to like get me through that, because it was kind of a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine 10 days. That's a long time to be alone in a room in a space that you aren't familiar with. But other than kind of like that social aspect, like how were classes and like juggling all of the other things that you have in your schedule, like being an athlete and having all these classes, like that transition and being away from that for 10 days? Like, how was that like?
What?
It was very difficult. So because I'd had like that brief like 2-3 days in the fall where I'd been at Oasis, and classes over the fall were really set up to have students be able to like join like online or remotely. And this semester, like that is not true, and it's not a requirement of the classes in the same way, or at least that my professors this semester have not, like that's not been a thing they've offered. That I really couldn't attend any of my classes with any like real capacity except for my core class. Teachers were generally helpful, but there's also like, it was kind of a lot of the attitude of like, I don't know what you want me to do. There was no accessible way to go to most classes. And like one time my professor's like, okay, I will Zoom you in and you can just sit there and listen. And he actually had himself muted for the whole hour and 15 minutes. And I was like, I can't leave because he's trying to be like helpful for my learning, but I was like, I can't hear anything. So I kind of sat there like hoping he'd see like my message in the chat, like, hey, you're on mute, by the way. But I talked to my mom during that time because I was like, Mom, it's just so weird. But other professors were like, you can't come in, but like I'll give you the notes. There was like a lot of classes here at like in humanities colleges do have like participation aspect as part of your grade, and there's just no real way to participate having COVID this semester like the way you could last semester, at least in my classes.
Yeah, I have noticed that for one class, it like I have one professor who like tries to kind of have Zoom as an option, but it never really works out, and he either like forgets sometimes, or he walks around a lot, so he like won't be near the computer for students online to be able to. So yeah, it's hard to watch that sometimes, be like, oh, like I know that you're trying, but I really don't think it's very helpful for anybody who is actually taking the class online, which is really, really unfortunate, especially since like people in isolation, like you have to, like, there's no choice. There's no like, there's no like excuse like, oh, I don't know, there's no like random excuse being made. Like you actually like, it's really serious that you can't go to class. And I feel like sometimes that level of seriousness is not always taken very well by professors sometimes.
It's like interesting, like because when I experienced COVID, I never got like that sick. It was like very much akin to a cold, like nothing serious. It wasn't like super prolonged. And it's also like the amount I got sick is that like pre-pandemic, you probably still would have gone to school, which is like we have such a different attitude towards getting sick now. Like my sister got a cold and my mom's like, I'm not getting anywhere near you. You can stay in your room. I don't want to get sick. I mean, my sister is 22 now, so like it's not like she's a child, but my mom used to definitely be the mom like, it's okay. I don't care if I get sick. I will like help you. And now it's much of like, you can help yourself. Like you're gonna be okay. Like I'll just be in the other room.
I feel like that even ties into the fact that you were driven in an ambulance in the fall semester just with a common cold. Like that sense of just like the symptoms themselves and always being on edge about what's gonna happen and your health it adds a level of stress to everyone's lives, especially when we're in this space, like enclosed space where if someone has it, you're more likely to get it too.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I have allergies and Ellen knows this, and I sneeze a lot. And I get really scared sometimes sneezing just out and about because I'm like, okay, guys, I swear, like I'm not sick. I don't have COVID. Like I regularly get tested. Like I'm really aware of this, but I just can't stop myself from sneezing sometimes. And I just think it's kind of interesting that I have to like be so aware of myself in public. When I have to sneeze, I'm like, no, hold it in, don't do it.
But like, I mean, Alyssa kind of brought this up, but you're also a CMS athlete. And so during that time, how were you in communication with like a coach, or was there anything you could really do in terms of training?
So the way Scripps has their quarantine situation set up is that you're in these apartments at Oasis, which are just next to the village, just south of the village, basically on the other side of the train track, which is actually horrible. I feel bad for like people who live on like Pomona because the train is so loud, guys. It would like wake me up and you're like, I have to like mute. I'd have to mute during like Zoom calls and be like, I'm so sorry, it's the train. I already forgot the question because I've started talking about this train. Training and talking to coaches. I think my coach at the time, my head coach, was kind of stressed out. I emailed him and I was like, hey, I tested positive for COVID. He never actually responded.
Oh, no.
But it's okay. I mean, it's whatever. Maybe he did respond, but it was like days later where it was kind of like, okay. So I told that coach and I'd also told my teammates. So I'm a jumper, so I do long and triple jump. So my other good friend on the track team, Simone, she's a freshman at CMC. She like told my that coach individually. But at Oasis, you're not allowed to leave the room at all. They like specifically say in the email that when you're like first like admitted into like the COVID protocols, that like you cannot leave the room and we're not giving you a key because you cannot leave the room. So you're in the room for 10 days straight, not able to go outside, not able to walk around. You're legitimately, you have everything you need. You have like a bathroom, you have a shower, you have like a full kitchen, but you're only in that really, really small space. So you're it's legitimately solitary confinement, like, because you can't like exercise at all, which was really hard. Like one day when I started to feel better, it was a weekend, so I didn't have any like classes I could like partially do, and like being in there by yourself, you just kind of like lose motivation to like do your homework. And I did like 200 push-ups one day, like not in a row because that's ridiculous, but I was like, I don't know what else to do. But then the next day, my like whole arms and shoulders and like chest were so sore. But like coming back after having done nothing for 10 days was super, super hard as an athlete, because the expectation is that like you've been training for like a month and a half at this point. We're training like 6 days a week. And I like literally had to like sit on my butt for 10 days, not being able to do anything except for like pace back and forth in my room. It's a 1-bedroom, like a studio. So you're in one space the whole time.
I don't know. I'm personally only just kind of gotten into leaving the room more, but I am like a introvert. So I feel like I'm trying to imagine being like, wow, you work out, you leave 6 days a week. That's crazy. Good for you. But that must have
It is
been really
impressive.
hard, like as a transition.
But you had mentioned that you were ordering things on Instacart. How did you order a lot of things, or did you find that you had to order a lot of things once you got there because you weren't sure what to bring, or you didn't anticipate having to bring certain things, either in the fall or in the spring?
Yeah, I've in the fall, like I had to order like cold medicine and I like Advil and stuff like that because it's just not something that like occurred to me when I was like going, because you were like, I was sick. And it's not that the expectation should be on Scripps to like supply that stuff, but it's just kind of like, oh, you should maybe bring this. I don't feel like what I've seen now is they do a better job of communicating what you should bring. I've seen Lauren Mello, who's our class president, post stuff on her story. I think it's from SAS about like protocols. But I just like never felt prepared in that. But all the food was there that you needed. Like I would definitely wasn't going hungry, but I love tangerines. And I was like, that's what's going to make me feel better. I just want to order tangerines and like kind of just snacks like that, where I was like, it is so kind of like lonely and like I'm sick of this Malot food that I'm not really picking, because at the beginning when you test positive for COVID, they send out a like survey and it's like, pick these meals on this day, where do you want this meal and this meal coming from? Like it's whatever station. So you have like vegetarian, Oasis, Grill, or Global. But so you have no idea what you're getting and you're ordering this out 10 days in advance. So every day was a bit of a surprise of what I was getting. And how they do it is they do like one drop off at like 10 a.m. and one drop off at like 4 p.m. And they literally drop it and run. They like doorbell ditch. They knock and they like sprint away. Like I didn't see anybody. And like Scripps didn't really like contact me very much at all, like the whole time I was in there either, which I found like weird, but also, I don't know, what were they gonna do?
Yeah. How did you like actually like find out and know that like your quarantine has ended, and did they like contact you and were they like, hey, it's been 10 days, we're gonna have you be tested now, or like what was that like?
Yeah, so you don't actually get tested when you go for the whole 10 days. You get tested on day 5. It's the 5th day that you're experiencing symptoms. What's annoying about SHS is that my 5th day was on a Saturday. So I actually had to wait till the Monday, which was Valentine's Day, fun fact, to test for like an antigen test. It's not like the nose test. But what's like annoying about that is that CMC, because they do have a separate program, they can test on weekends. And they can also test every single day that they are in quarantine to see if they pass the antigen test. Whereas Scripps students can only test one time on day 5. So I was like I like left on that 5th day, which wasn't actually my 5th day. It was like my 7th day on that Monday. I like was driven in the Scripps van, which is how they transport people now, not ambulances. Thank God, probably, because it was costing us a lot of money, to SHS. And I took an antigen test and it's supposed to take like 10 minutes to develop. Within 2 minutes, they were like, nope, you're still positive, you're going back. So then I get driven back. And then the man drops me off outside the apartment buildings, and I'm like supposed to go in again. And then I realize I can't get into the apartment building because just like at Scripps, there's like a code or like a key to get into the building, and then also like a key to your door. And I have the key to my room was unlocked, but I didn't have a way to get into the building, and the man had already driven away. So then I'm like sitting outside the building, and it's like 8 a.m. And I call the lady who's in charge of COVID protocols here at Scripps, and I'm like, hi, like I'm like crying at this point because I'm like, it was such a letdown to test positive still, because I just was like so tired of being in there. I was like, hi, I'm walked out of the building, and she's like on her way to work, and she's like, okay, I can be there in 20 minutes. And I was like, okay, great. so I had to like wait outside Oasis for her to like come scan me into the building. And I'm like crying this whole time. It's kind of, I think it's funny, but it was Valentine's Day. So I sent a picture jokingly to my friend of me crying. And I was like, because I have like no significant other, like that's why I was crying, but because it was Valentine's Day. So I spent Valentine's Day alone.
Oh
Then I got like let back in, and that was like the first time I'd been outside for like an extended period of time,
Wow.
which was nice, but
Love the
also
fact
kind of
that you were
sucked.
crying while you were enjoying the outside space.
It was a big letdown.
But kind of transitioning back to being in person, how was that? Was it like freeing to finally be able to like be back on campus and like train 6 days a week and like see people? Or was like the transition kind of hard? I imagine with like classes, it may have been a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, so I missed like an in-class midterm while I had COVID. So that was one thing that like hung over my head for like a week and a half after getting out. I got out on a Thursday. But it's just kind of like a lot of things that I like, they were like, oh, I can give you an extension. And like having been in COVID with certain like activities, I was like, yeah, that'd be so great. Because I literally being in this like in that one small room like that whole time, I like was like had no motivation, and it was like very depressing, like just being there. So it's like I'll take that extension, but then coming back with the expectation of like, oh wait, that means I have to like go to class and I have to do all this stuff. And I was like, I have 10 days of laundry I have to do, as well as like the laundry that I'd left behind. It's just like I missed so much. I was like, what happened over the weekend? Like, what has been going on? How did our track team do? Like, I felt like I was like re-entering the world after being like dead or something. Like, it was like stressful. And I was glad I kind of got in at the end of the week, because I did have that weekend to just be like, oh my God, what is like happening? Like readjust with people, which was good. And everyone was like, where were you? And I was like, I had COVID. And they're like,
That's a lot. Was there a part of that you found the most difficult to navigate coming back?
I just think getting back into going to school every day, as well as just like doing work that I missed. Like I noticed that when I did the transition from like the first 2 weeks of school that had been online to school in person, I was like, oh my God, this is so stressful. Like you have to like walk so much. And it kind of felt like that same kind of transition, because we'd just gone to class in person. So most of the classes, when I tested positive for COVID, I'd only really gone to like once or twice in person. And then I was like back online. So I didn't like even know the professors. So it was just kind of interesting.
Because we know that there are still lots of cases and people we know are still going into Oasis, are there any pieces of advice you would give to them, or anything you think they should know before they get the news and they're like, okay, start packing?
Yeah. Make sure you bring tissues, because they don't give you tissues. And I was like using toilet paper, and like my nose was so like sad at the end of like having my stuffy nose. And also bring like cold medicines, or kind of like whatever medicines that you might need, like Advil, Tylenol, whatever, like that kind of medicine that you take to like mitigate symptoms, basically, because it's really hard to be sick and then like figure out how to get medicine to yourself. It's a pain in the butt. Yeah. I also want to share another thing with my experience with COVID, and maybe Scripps' slight disorganization. Last Monday, I had a cough. So I like on my chart thing, I marked, I've had a cough. And so then they're like, at the end, after you finish your survey, the health police survey, they're like, okay, like call these numbers, which is like the Scripps like COVID hotline. So I call and I'm like, hey, I just checked off that I had a symptom. And they're like, okay, we're gonna have to like send you to Oasis. And I was like, wait, I've already had COVID, so I don't think I have COVID. And she was like, okay, well, just like wear a mask. You're like not gonna be in isolation here at Scripps. You just need to get an antigen test. And I was like, okay, great. Where do I get the antigen test? And she's like, go to CHS. And I was kind of confused when she said that, because when I had to get a CHS antigen test when I had COVID, I had to call myself, and they only offer those to people who have COVID. So when I called CHS and was like, hey, can I get an antigen test? They were like, no, we don't give antigen tests to just students. You have to be coming out of quarantine in order to get those tests. And I was like, okay, well, I still have to get an antigen test. So I call back the Scripps people and I'm like, hey, just so you know, the student health services won't give me an antigen test. And this lady's like, oh, also, by the way, I made a mistake. You actually have to stay in your room and don't leave your room until you're able to get that negative test. And I'm like, okay, great. But where am I supposed to get this test? Because I can't get it through student health services and you're asking me to get this test. So what is the expectation that I get this test? And she's like, well, you can go to the pharmacy that's in town. And I'm like, I can't get there today. This was before I knew that I would have to be isolated, or I was supposed to isolate. And I was like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And it's kind of unfair for Scripps to put the expectation for me to buy the antigen tests, or not give me an easy way to access them. Cause I'm fortunate enough for that, X amount of dollars, $10 that is not a big financial burden, but that might not be the case for all students. Luckily, one of my friends happened to have antigen tests. So I call her and I'm like, hey, can I use one of your antigen tests? And she's like, okay, yeah, sure. So she comes, runs over and drops one off. And this is all happening before 10 a.m. because I'm trying to get to my French class. Because this is because I'm like, I don't want to have to miss all my classes on that Monday. So I take the test and I'm come back negative. And then I called them back and I was like, hey, I tested negative. And then she's like, okay, you need to now email your the dean on call and tell her what happened and why you tested negative and send your negative test. And it's just kind of disorganized how Scripps organizes it all, because their communication from the Scripps COVID people and the student health services in regards to COVID are not connected. While you're in quarantine, the expectation is that you are calling to make those appointments to get tested, which is just kind of odd because you're I can't control any part of my life. So maybe you should be, or helping guide me. But so I've almost gone to Oasis for a third time this year, but luckily I tested negative and I won't have to test again until finals week, which will be my 3 months out from when I originally tested positive.
Yeah, I think I've heard a lot, or not a lot, but I've heard a couple times that when you call whoever you originally called, whoever you call when you have symptoms, or when they call you, they don't I've heard that they will tell you something and then they will call you back later and be like, just kidding. Here's another list of things that you have to do instead. And I feel in the fall, maybe, okay, that's understandable. We were figuring it out. I don't think we had even a COVID team until end of fall, maybe. And that's kind of understandable. It's you don't really have it fully organized. But at this point, there's been so many people going to Oasis and testing positive, or everybody fills out these symptom surveys, and you don't want people to lie, obviously. You want people to be honest about if they have symptoms, but nobody is going to want to be honest when they want to just ship you off if you have a sniffle.
No, I've been honest twice,
bye.
And both times were so stressful.
Yeah, and there should be if you're gonna have people and you want to create a space where people are going to be honest, you have to have a simple solution or a simple task, okay, stay in your room, we will do this and do this and do this, or something. Not just okay, bye, we're gonna make you leave for 10 days and your classes are all in person, but figure that out. That's just a little ridiculous to me.
See, the figure that out thing too is that I talked to the COVID people, hey, what am I supposed to do about classes, thinking they kind of have a procedure, and they're okay, talk to your primary contact dean. In contacting my primary contact dean, she's it's up to you kind of to communicate with your teachers. but you can like CC me on the emails. I'm like, okay, like it's fine that I have to like communicate with my teachers, but I feel like there should be some sort of protocol through administration for students that test positive. Like some like official like note being like, hey, this student tests positive, like if you could like help, I don't know, facilitate their learning while they're in quarantine or something. But it's just, it really comes down to you as a student being put in quarantine. And I didn't find that Scripps was very helpful on like many fronts in terms of like managing me or like being in contact.
No. Yeah, it sounds like they took a very hands-off approach once you were there. They were just like, we're gonna put you here and then we're just gonna leave you for the next few days. You do what you want.
Yeah, I would like get calls sometimes and being like, do you have like, how are you feeling? And I'd be like, not great, like, or whatever it would be, but it wasn't like, you're very detached. And I think it's good now that they offer like some therapy like services. I don't like, we just got an email about that for specific hours for people who've tested positive and who are in quarantine can like use. And I was like, I would have benefited a lot from that. I wish they'd started that program sooner.
I guess, now that I think about it.
I mean, I didn't even think about the trains. Like that's a whole different issue that you brought up. Like,
yeah, they like toot their horns when they cross like intersections, and there's like an intersection right there, so it's quite loud.
Wow.
But yeah, because like I'd want to keep my window open because I wanted like fresh air, and you have the trains and you're like, there's a lot of things going on. I was like also on the first floor, so people were walking by the whole time, which was kind of like funny. And like I'd just like be sitting at my desk and I'd like to make eye contact with them because it was like that was like most of my like in-person human interactions. And like anytime you make eye contact with people, because I was like, I have nothing to lose here. I have nothing to lose.
they don't know you and
They're like, oh my God, I didn't mean to. Like a little kid said hi to me one time and I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, I love that. Human interaction when you need it the most. I mean, it's been so interesting hearing about all of this because I feel like Alyssa and I have heard little snippets, but not really the entire story. And especially since you've had experience in Oasis both for fall and spring, it's really interesting hearing about how they've kind of developed this program, even if it's not the most logistically sound or put together.
Given the recent wave too, and like the changes that they're making just because so many students had to isolate is also very interesting because I don't know, I would have thought that maybe they would have thought about what would happen if there was a wave of students who got COVID, but I guess they took the figured out by experience. I guess, but it was really great to hear about, not great because it didn't sound like a great experience, but it was interesting to hear about your time at Oasis and how it's kind of changed, especially with all the procedures now.
Yeah, we're glad to hear that you're feeling okay, that you didn't have too bad of symptoms at least.
I'm glad you weren't sent a third time.
Yeah, honestly.
Definitely that would have been you would have had like a full round trip experience that way.
I need like an award or something. Like I've done it. I've done it all, I guess.
Oh my gosh, maybe Scripps will develop something like that after this year, everything you've had to go through. Like
I don't think I got anybody else sick with COVID, so I feel like that was also a success of me getting COVID.
yes.
But that was like kind of my main worry, like this like whole pandemic of like getting COVID and like giving it to somebody else and them not being okay. But I was like very lucky that everyone I've known who's gotten COVID has been able to recover, and I didn't give it to anybody. So
yes, we love that. I feel like let's stay safe, everyone, with everything that is going on. We only have 4 more weeks as of the day of this recording. But yeah, no, Scarlett, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this experience. I know that it's sometimes like talking about this can be really personal, so we really appreciate you being comfortable telling us about it and letting us ask you so many questions about everything that went on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope this is like helpful a little bit, or might be a good like historical archive of what COVID was like in 2021 here at Scripps.
2024 Our Story is published through Scripps Communities of Resources and Empowerment. This episode was edited by Ellen Hu, and Instagram graphics are designed by Alyssa Wend. Callie is courtesy of Wadaboy on Pixabay. If you were interested in joining us on an episode, please fill out the Google form available within our Linktree. You can find that link as well as more content on our Instagram page at 2024 Our Story Podcast. Be on the lookout for SCORE's April programs on Instagram and in your school inboxes. Some of this month's content includes a 3-part screening of Wongfu Productions Yappy, zine-making events, study hours with your SCORE interns, and more. That's everything we have for you today. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye!